Quick question. Where are you listening from today? Which city? Which country? Drop it below. Now let's dive into today's story. Victor Callahan's home office was his sanctuary, a place where he designed countless buildings that now shaped the city's skyline. Tonight, it felt more like an execution chamber. The monitor's glow cast harsh shadows across his face as he stared at the email draft open before him. Years of wins in the architectural world hadn't prepared him for this moment when pressing send would detonate a bomb in his own life. His finger hovered over the mouse. On the screen, dozens of intimate photos told a story of betrayal spanning 18 years. Charlotte, his wife, wrapped in the arms of James Morrison Jim to their social circle, Uncle Jim to their daughter. The timestamps mocked him. Dinner parties where they'd all laugh together. Family vacations where Jim had tagged along as the eternal friend. School events where he'd stood beside them in photos. Everyone smiling at the camera while sharing a secret he'd been too blind to see. A fresh image appeared in his notification bar, another update from his private investigator. Victor clicked it open. Charlotte and Jim leaving the Hamilton Hotel just 3 hours ago, her hand lingering on his arm as they parted ways. Her wedding ring caught the afternoon sun, a final twist of the knife. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 7, its chimes echoing through the empty house. Victor reached for the glass of whiskey on his desk. Macallan 25, a gift from Jim last Christmas. For the man who is everything, Jim had said with that insufferable smirk. Victor took a long sip, savoring the bitter irony along with the burn. His phone buzzed. A text from Charlotte. Working late again. Don't wait up. The familiar lies sparked something cold and hard in his chest. He opened his email's recipient list one final time, reviewing the names. Their entire social circle, the country club board, Charlotte's charity committee chairs, the parents' association at Rachel's private school, and his finger hesitated for just a moment the board of directors at Morrison Investment Group, where Jim had recently made partner. The study door burst open with enough force to rattle the family photos on the wall. Rachel stood in the doorway, her phone clutched so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Tears had left dark mascara trails down her cheeks. Dad, what are you doing? Her voice cracked with emotion. Aunt Beatrice just called me crying. She said you're sending out private photos of Mom. She said, Rachel's breath hitched. She said they're horrible, intimate things. Please tell me this isn't true. Victor studied his daughter's face, really studied it, as he had been doing ever since the DNA results had arrived last week. The green eyes that had always seemed so striking against her dark hair weren't a genetic quirk, as Charlotte had claimed. They were Jim Morrison's eyes, staring back at him with the same self-righteous anger he'd seen in the man's face countless times over the years. Your mother made her choice long ago, Victor replied, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Now she gets to live with the consequences. Rachel stalked forward, slamming her hands down on his mahogany desk. A framed photo of their last family vacation toppled over the one where Jim had coincidentally booked the suite next door. Fix this right now. Mom's reputation will be ruined. She's already had to leave the house because of you. Let me guess she's at the Hamilton? Victor's calm words cut through Rachel's anger. Room 812? The same room she's been meeting Jim in every Thursday for the past 5 years. What are you talking about? Rachel's confusion only twisted the knife deeper. Victor slowly opened his desk drawer, removing 2 documents he'd memorized over the past week. Rachel's birth certificate and a DNA test report. Next to them, he placed a stack of hotel receipts, credit card statements, and surveillance photos spanning years. Speaking of choices, his voice caught slightly before he steeled himself. Your mother made quite an important one 18 years ago. Several important ones, actually, like deciding to pass another man's child off as mine while systematically draining our accounts to fund her second life. Rachel snatched the papers, her eyes scanning rapidly across the pages. The color drained from her face as understanding dawned. This can't be right. Uncle Jim? No, there has to be some mistake. The only mistake, Victor said, pulling up financial records on his screen, was trusting your mother all these years. Your Uncle Jim shares 99.9% parental markers with you. He's been playing father while I paid the bills quite literally. He highlighted a series of transactions. Every time Jim generously offered to help with your education expenses, the money was actually coming from accounts your mother had been siphoning from my firm. Rachel's phone erupted with notifications. She scrolled through them with shaking hands, her breathing growing more erratic with each message. Screenshots of the photos were already spreading through their social circle like wildfire. The phone suddenly lit up with Charlotte's caller ID. Victor reached over and pressed the speaker button before Rachel could react. "How dare you, Victor?" Charlotte's voice filled the room, shrill with rage. "I'm filing for divorce first thing tomorrow, and I'll take everything. Jim and I will—" "Well, what?" Victor cut her off, ice crystallizing in his tone. "Finally be a proper family? Tell Rachel how you've been lying to her entire life? Or maybe explain how you've been using my insurance to build her college fund while Jim helps you embezzle from my firm? You have no proof, don't I?" Victor pulled up another document on his screen. "Should we discuss the offshore account in the Caymans? The one where Jim's been transferring funds through a shell company that supposedly contracted my firm for architectural services we never provided? My accountant found that paper trail quite fascinating." Rachel backed away from the desk, shaking her head as if trying to deny reality itself. The phone clattered to the floor as she fled the study. Her footsteps thundered up the stairs, followed by the slam of her bedroom door. Through the ceiling, Victor could hear the muffled sound of her sobs. Charlotte was still ranting through the speaker. "You vindictive bastard. You think you're so clever, but you have no idea what's coming. Jim has connections." "Yes, I'm well aware of Jim's connections," Victor interrupted. "Both professional and personal. Tell me, does the SEC know about his creative accounting at Morrison Investment Group? Or how he's been using my firm's reputation to legitimize his money laundering operation?" There was a long pause before Charlotte spoke again, her voice dripping with venom. "You wouldn't dare. You'll destroy everything: your reputation, your firm, Rachel's future." "No, Charlotte. You already did that. I'm just making sure everyone knows exactly who's responsible." The line went dead. Victor sat back in his chair, listening to the sounds of his daughter's grief echoing through the house. His finger moved to the mouse again, but the send button was no longer necessary. The truth was already spreading, unstoppable as a wildfire. His phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Santos, Charlotte's lawyer. "Emergency meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. This is your last chance to contain this situation." Victor allowed himself a grim smile as he thought of the USB drive in his safe, loaded with evidence his private investigator had gathered over the past 6 months. Charlotte wasn't the only one who'd been making plans. Upstairs, something crashed against a wall. Victor closed his eyes, feeling the weight of Rachel's pain. That was the one cost he hadn't wanted to pay, but Charlotte had forced his hand. Better his daughter learn the truth now than spend her life trapped in a web of lies. His phone lit up with another message, this time from Dominic Wells, his investigator. "New information on the Morrison Group connection. Meeting tomorrow?" "After the lawyers," Victor replied. "Bring everything you have." He walked to his safe and spun the dial, removing the USB drive that would be his first salvo in tomorrow's battle. Inside were videos, financial records, and surveillance reports documenting years of fraud. Charlotte and Jim had built their relationship on his foundation. Now he would take pleasure in watching it crumble. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a sharp contrast to the storm brewing in Victor's conference room. Patricia Santos sat across from him, her professional demeanor cracking slightly as she delivered Charlotte's demands. "Half of your assets, including controlling interest in the firm," she stated, sliding a document across the polished table. "Plus substantial alimony, given the length of the marriage and Charlotte's contributions as a homemaker. Given your vindictive behavior with those photos, the judge will—" Victor didn't let her finish. He placed the USB drive on the table and slid it toward her. "Before you continue with those threats, Ms. Santos, I suggest you review this evidence. Pay particular attention to the videos of Charlotte and Jim discussing their long-term fraud." Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly as she inserted the drive into her laptop. Her expression shifted from skepticism to shock as she watched snippets of secretly recorded conversations. Charlotte and Jim planning their deceptions, discussing offshore accounts, laughing about using Victor's health insurance for Rachel, while Jim reimbursed Charlotte under the table. "This changes things," Patricia admitted, her professional mask slipping further as she watched Charlotte detail how she'd been copying confidential files from Victor's home office to help Jim's firm target wealthy clients for their investment schemes. "That's just the beginning," Victor replied. "There's quite a paper trail showing how they've been using my firm's reputation to facilitate their fraud. I wonder how the Bar Association would view an attorney who knowingly participated in such schemes." Patricia closed her laptop with a sharp click. "I'll need to consult with my client." "Of course," Victor smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Take all the time you need. Just remember, the longer this drags out, the more likely these documents find their way to the relevant authorities." After Patricia left, Victor sat alone in the conference room, studying the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Several of the buildings out there bore his firm's distinctive style. He'd built something real, something lasting. Charlotte and Jim had built nothing but lies. His phone buzzed. Rachel, finally breaking her silence, coming home after school. "We need to talk." "Whenever you're ready," he replied, then added after a moment's thought, "I love you." 3 dots appeared as she typed, disappeared, then appeared again. "Finally, I know. But I don't know what to believe anymore." Victor put down his phone and turned back to the window. The sun had risen fully now, casting long shadows across the city. Somewhere out there, Charlotte was probably already plotting her next move, believing she still held cards to play. Let her try, Victor thought. The truth was already out there, spreading through their social circles, dismantling the carefully constructed facade she'd maintained for nearly 2 decades. By the time the dust settled, everyone would know exactly who Charlotte and Jim really were. The price would be high: relationships shattered, reputations ruined, his daughter's world turned upside down. But Victor had spent 18 years paying for Charlotte's lies. Now it was her turn to face the bill. "Mr. Callahan?" His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your investigator is here with the new financial documents." Victor straightened his tie, checked his reflection in the window. The man looking back at him seemed different, somehow harder perhaps, but also more alive than he'd been in years. "Send him in," Victor replied. "It's time to see just how deep this rabbit hole goes." 3 days of suffocating silence had settled over the Callahan house. Rachel's bedroom door remained locked, her muffled sobs the only sign of life. Victor had given her space, knowing the devastation of learning your entire life was built on lies. He'd spent those days in his study, methodically building the case that would destroy Charlotte and Jim's carefully constructed world. The doorbell's chimes shattered the morning quiet. Catherine stood on his doorstep, her usual corporate polish showing signs of strain. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hands clutched a thick manila envelope like a lifeline. "You look like hell," she said, brushing past him into the house. "Pot, kettle," Victor replied, noting how his sister's fingers trembled slightly. "I assume this isn't a social call?" Catherine's heels clicked against hardwood as she made her way to his study. The sound reminded him of Charlotte's footsteps, always rushing, always hiding something. Catherine locked the door behind them and pulled a stack of photographs from her envelope. "I should have told you 5 years ago," she said, spreading the photos across his desk. "I took these during that Singapore merger trip." Victor picked up the first photo. Charlotte and Jim wrapped around each other in a hotel lobby, lost in their own world. The timestamp showed 3 a.m. "She claimed she was too sick to join me in Beijing that week," Victor said, his voice flat. "Migraine, if I remember correctly." "Oh, she was in Asia all right." Catherine's voice dripped acid. "Following Jim's investor circuit like a lovesick teenager." "Look at these." More photos emerged: Charlotte and Jim entering hotel rooms, sharing intimate dinners, walking hand in hand through foreign streets. In one, they sat at a business dinner with several Asian investors, Charlotte playing the devoted wife role perfectly, except she was at Jim's side, not Victor's. "I confronted her when I got back," Catherine continued, slumping into a chair. "She spun this elaborate tale about your marriage being troubled, how Jim was just supporting her through a rough patch. Swore it was a one-time thing, already over. Then she started talking about Rachel. And you believed her?" "No." Catherine pulled out her phone. I believed she'd destroy Rachel if I forced her hand. So I watched, I gathered evidence, and I hired people to dig deeper. Last week, my forensic accountant found this. She pulled up spreadsheets showing wire transfers, property deals, and shell companies. Jim's been embezzling millions through his investment firm. Those developments you designed for his investment properties? All money laundering fronts. Every single one. Victor studied the numbers, his architect's mind recognizing patterns. Show me everything. For the next 3 hours, they pieced together an elaborate criminal enterprise. Jim had been using Victor's architectural plans to justify inflated construction costs, laundering money through fake contracts. Charlotte copied confidential files from Victor's home office, helping them target wealthy clients for their investment scams. There's more, Catherine said, pulling up another document. Remember that children's hospital project you designed pro bono last year? Victor nodded. The project had been close to his heart, a state-of-the-art facility for critically ill children. Jim's firm handled some of the charitable donations. They skimmed nearly $2 million from the construction fund. Catherine's voice shook with rage. Children are getting substandard care because they couldn't keep their greedy hands off charity money. Before Victor could respond, Rachel's voice came from the doorway. Is that why Uncle Jim insisted on handling my medical bills when I had pneumonia last year? They turned to find her standing there, looking pale but determined. Catherine quickly gathered the photos, but Rachel waved her off. Don't bother hiding them, Aunt Cat. I'm having dinner with them tonight at their hotel. They want to explain their side of things. Victor and Catherine exchanged glances. Rachel, after what we just found out, I need to hear them out. Rachel cut him off. I need to understand how they could. She gestured at the evidence scattered across the desk. How they could do all this. Victor studied his daughter's face, seeing shadows of his own determination there. Just remember what I taught you about people's actions versus their words. I remember everything you taught me, Dad. Rachel's voice carried a new edge, including how to read people's tells when they're lying. After she left, Catherine turned to her brother. She's tougher than they realize. She's a Callahan, Victor replied, turning back to the financial records. Even if her DNA says otherwise. The afternoon brought more revelations. Victor's team discovered Charlotte had been photographing his client files for years, providing Jim with detailed information about potential victims' finances. They found offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, and Switzerland, all funded through fake construction projects using Victor's stolen designs. Mr. Callahan? His assistant's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Wells is here with new information about the hospital project. Dominic Wells entered carrying a thick file. You're not going to like this, he said, laying out documents. Jim's firm didn't just skim from the hospital fund. They've been running a giant Ponzi scheme, using new investments to pay fake returns to earlier victims. How many victims? Victor asked. At least 50 families, most of them your clients. They specifically targeted parents with chronically ill children, promising exclusive investment opportunities that would secure their kids' medical care. Dominic played an audio recording. Charlotte's voice filled the room. The Matthews just doubled their investment. Their daughter's cancer treatment isn't covered by insurance, so they're desperate for returns. Jim's laugh followed, perfect. Routed through the hospital construction account, then offshore. By the time they realize anything's wrong, we'll be long gone. Victor's hands clenched into fists. The Matthews daughter was Rachel's age, a girl who'd spent half her life fighting leukemia. He designed their house with special modifications for her care, never suspecting Charlotte was using that connection to target them. The front door slammed before he could respond. Rachel stormed into the study, her face flushed with rage and tears streaming down her cheeks. They tried to convince me you're the villain, she spat. Said you knew about them all along, but kept quiet to protect the firm's reputation. That you only exposed them now because Mom wanted a divorce. Victor stayed silent, letting her vent. Catherine pulled her into a hug, but Rachel shrugged it off. Then they offered to pay for my entire college tuition if I testified against you in the divorce. Her laugh held no humor. Mom said I should be grateful that everything they did was for my future. So I asked about my childhood medical bills, the ones Uncle Jim paid through her. What did they say? Catherine asked softly. Mom couldn't even look at me. But Jim. Rachel's voice cracked. He laughed, said it was worth every penny to keep their arrangement going. Then I overheard them in the hallway, arguing about moving money around before the divorce. Mom said they needed to clean more funds through the hospital project. Victor handed her the Matthews file. Rachel read it, her face growing paler with each page. Sarah Matthews sits next to me in calculus, she whispered. She's worried about having to leave school because her parents can't afford the treatment anymore. Did they steal from her family too? They stole from everyone, Dominic confirmed. Used your father's reputation to gain trust, then drained their accounts through fake investments. Rachel looked up, her eyes hard. I want to help take them down. Rachel, Catherine started. No, listen. I have Mom's phone password. I've seen them enter codes for their accounts. I know conversations I overheard, meetings I was present for. And I know Sarah Matthews would testify about how they approached her parents through me. Victor studied his daughter, seeing past the pain to the steel beneath. Are you sure? Once we start this, there's no going back. They used me against you for 18 years, Rachel said. Used our family's name to hurt innocent people. Even stole from sick children. She straightened her shoulders. I want to be there when they fall. Victor nodded, pride mixing with determination. Dominic, contact the SEC, Catherine. Get your forensic team to compile everything about the hospital fraud. It's time to end this. That night, as storm clouds gathered over the city, Victor stood at his study window. Somewhere out there, Charlotte and Jim were probably celebrating another successful manipulation, believing themselves untouchable. They'd spent 18 years building their empire on his family's pain, using his daughter as a shield and his reputation as a weapon. His phone buzzed a message from Charlotte. Rachel told us about your evidence. Drop this vendetta now, or you'll regret it. Jim has friends in high places. Another message followed. Think about Rachel's future. Do you really want everyone knowing her father is a fraud? Victor smiled grimly. Charlotte had always underestimated him, mistaking his patience for weakness. She'd forgotten who had taught Rachel about justice and consequences, about standing up against wrong no matter the personal cost. Mr. Callahan? His assistant called through the intercom. The SEC agents are here for the briefing. Victor took one last look at the city skyline. Each glittering building held stories of ambition, of greed, of people thinking they were above the law. Tomorrow, Charlotte and Jim would learn that no one was untouchable. Not when they'd hurt his family, his clients, and innocent children who needed help. Send them in, he replied. It's time they learned exactly what we have. Rachel appeared in the doorway, Catherine beside her. Both women carried files, evidence gathered over years of suspicion and pain. Outside, lightning split the sky as the storm finally broke. Tomorrow, the real war would begin, and Victor would make sure Charlotte and Jim learned the true price of their betrayal. The marble steps of the courthouse gleamed in the morning sun as Victor adjusted his tie, each step measured and purposeful. Rachel walked beside him, her navy blazer and straight spine projecting a strength that belied her inner turmoil. Catherine trailed behind them, carrying a briefcase filled with the final pieces of evidence that would seal Charlotte and Jim's fate. Inside courtroom 312, Charlotte held court at the defendant's table, her Chanel suit and perfect makeup a calculated performance of innocence. Jim sat in the gallery behind her, his usual arrogant smirk wavering slightly at the sight of the SEC agents flanking the doors. Their legal team, led by Patricia Santos, huddled together whispering urgently. All rise. The bailiff's voice cut through the tension. The Honorable Judge Eleanor Martinez presiding. Judge Martinez's reputation for handling white-collar crime preceded her. She'd spent the last week reviewing evidence of Charlotte and Jim's schemes, each revelation darkening her expression further. Ms. Santos, the judge began, you may present your opening statement. Charlotte's lawyer rose, smoothing her skirt. Your Honor, what we have here is a tragic misunderstanding. My client, Mrs. Callahan, was herself a victim of manipulation by James Morrison, a trusting woman, led astray by... Objection, Your Honor. Victor's lawyer, Michael Chun, stood. This characterization directly contradicts the evidence already presented. including Mrs. Callahan's own recorded statements. Sustained. Judge Martinez's steel-gray eyes fixed on Charlotte. Ms. Santos, given the extensive audio and video evidence we've reviewed this week, I suggest you reconsider your strategy. The prosecution began their final presentation. Security footage showed Charlotte in Victor's office at 3 a.m., methodically photographing client files. Bank records traced money flowing from victims' accounts through shell companies, then into offshore accounts Charlotte controlled. Furthermore, Chin continued, pulling up new evidence. Mrs. Callahan didn't just participate in these schemes. She actively identified targets based on their vulnerabilities. He played an audio clip from last month. Charlotte's voice filled the courtroom. The Anderson family is perfect. Their son's cancer treatments have drained their savings. Offer them the special hospital investment package. Jim's reply, "You're brilliant, darling. This is why we work so well together. Victor never appreciated your mind for business." Charlotte's perfectly manicured nails dug into the table as more evidence mounted. Each revelation showed not a manipulated victim, but a calculating predator who had used her husband's reputation to destroy lives. "Your Honor," Santos attempted again, "my client was clearly under Mr. Morrison's influence. She deserves protection as a victim." The prosecution played their final card. Security footage from the hotel where Rachel had confronted them last week. Charlotte and Jim, laughing about using Victor's reputation, planning which client to target next. The timestamp destroyed any claim of reformed behavior. "Ms. Santos," Judge Martinez's voice could have cut steel. "Do you have any response to this evidence?" Charlotte stood abruptly, her facade cracking. "This is all Victor's fault. He was never home, always working. Jim appreciated me, valued me. Everything we did was for our future." "Mrs. Callahan," the judge warned, "I strongly advise you to sit down." "No, you don't understand. Victor's the real criminal. His projects, his clients, we just took advantage of what he created. He's trying to destroy me because I finally found real love." "Mom, stop." Rachel's quiet voice carried across the courtroom. All eyes turned to her as she approached the witness stand. For the next hour, Rachel methodically dismantled 18 years of manipulation. She described watching Jim and Charlotte exchange secret looks at family dinners, remembering conversations that now held sinister meanings. She detailed how they'd used her as a shield, weaponizing Victor's love for his daughter to keep him blind to their schemes. The worst part wasn't learning about their affair. Rachel's voice shook slightly. It was discovering how they used our family's reputation to steal from people who trusted us. Sarah Matthews sits next to me in calculus. Her mother works 2 jobs now because they lost everything to my mother's investment scam. Charlotte tried to interrupt, but Rachel continued, stronger now. They stole from the Children's Hospital Fund, from families facing medical bankruptcies, from anyone they could trick using Dad's name and reputation. And last week, Rachel's voice hardened, they tried to bribe me. Offered to pay for college if I'd testify that Dad knew about everything and kept quiet for the firm's reputation. When I refused, Mom said I was ungrateful for everything they'd sacrificed to give me a better life. Victor watched his daughter with fierce pride. She'd grown stronger through this ordeal, forged in the fire of betrayal into something unbreakable. Charlotte stood again, desperation cracking her polished veneer. "She's just angry because we protected her from the truth. Jim and I are her real family. Victor only cares about his precious reputation. That's enough." Judge Martinez's voice could have frozen hell. "Mrs. Callahan, throughout this proceeding, you have shown not only a complete lack of remorse, but continued attempts at manipulation. Your own daughter's testimony reveals a pattern of exploitation that extends beyond mere financial crimes." The judge reviewed her notes before continuing. "The evidence shows systematic fraud, theft, and exploitation spanning nearly 2 decades. You used your husband's reputation and firm to facilitate extensive financial crimes. You specifically targeted vulnerable families, including parents of critically ill children." Charlotte's smugness finally shattered as the judge continued. "Most reprehensibly, you used your own daughter as a shield for your criminal activities, then attempted to bribe her to commit perjury. The ruling came like thunder. This court finds absolutely no grounds for any claim to Mr. Callahan's assets. Furthermore, given the overwhelming evidence of criminal conspiracy, I am recommending federal prosecution for multiple counts of fraud, money laundering, and witness tampering. FBI agents entered before Charlotte could protest. Jim rose, reaching for his phone. "Mr. Morrison," the judge called, "I wouldn't waste time calling your connections. The SEC has already frozen your firm's assets, and your board received copies of all evidence this morning." Victor watched silently as federal agents led Jim away in handcuffs, his expensive suit suddenly looking cheap and ill-fitting. Charlotte stood frozen, her perfect world crumbling to dust. "Your Honor," Victor spoke for the first time, "I have one final matter to address." He approached the bench with documents Catherine had helped prepare. "I've established a legitimate scholarship fund to replace not only my daughter's tainted college fund, but to assist all families affected by these crimes. Additionally, I'm creating a trust specifically focused on helping families with medical needs who were victimized by these schemes." Judge Martinez reviewed the documents, nodding approval. "The court commends your commitment to making amends, Mr. Callahan. Though you bear no legal responsibility for your wife's crimes, your actions demonstrate true character." Charlotte was led away, designer heels clicking a final retreat. Her last look at Victor held 18 years of lies finally exposed to light. 6 months passed like a cleansing storm. Victor stood in his newly redesigned office, the city skyline a testament to honest work and true achievement. His firm had not only survived the scandal but thrived, its reputation enhanced by his transparent handling of the crisis and commitment to making things right. Catherine had helped reorganize the firm's security protocols, ensuring no one could ever again abuse their client's trust. The Matthews family had been first to benefit from the scholarship fund. Sarah would start college alongside Rachel next fall. Rachel entered, carrying an envelope bearing the state university seal. "Got my acceptance letter?" Her smile, though small, was genuine, the first he'd seen in months. "Architecture program. Think you could handle having 2 architects in the family?" Victor hugged his daughter, feeling the weight of the past year finally lifting. "Blood doesn't make a family," he said softly. "The choices we make do." Through the window, they watched a familiar figure in an orange safety vest picking up trash along the courthouse steps. Charlotte's community service was just beginning. Her designer wardrobe replaced by practical clothing, her world reduced to the consequences of her choices. "She looks different," Rachel observed dispassionately. "Consequences tend to have that effect," Victor replied. His phone buzzed with another client signing on, drawn by his honest handling of the crisis. The Children's Hospital project was back on track, this time with transparent oversight and proper funding. "Dad?" Rachel's voice held new strength. "Thank you for showing me what integrity really means." Victor squeezed her shoulder. Looking out at the city, he'd helped build this time on a foundation of truth. The price of honesty had been high, but the reward was standing right beside him. Together, they would design something new, something real. Downtown, Charlotte bent to pick up another piece of trash, her orange vest a beacon of justice served. In a federal prison upstate, Jim Morrison began another night contemplating how his empire of lies had crumbled. And in his office, Victor Callahan held his daughter close, knowing that sometimes the strongest structures rise from the ashes of betrayal. The future stretched before them, bright with possibility. Victor's firm had emerged stronger, its reputation for integrity attracting clients who valued truth over empty promises. Rachel would follow in his footsteps, building her own legacy of honest work and real achievement. The truth had cost them their illusions, but had given them something far more valuable: authenticity, healing, and a chance to rebuild on a foundation that would never crack. Epilogue: the foundations of truth. 5 years had transformed the city's skyline. New buildings rose like testament to progress, many bearing the distinctive mark of Callahan and Daughter Architects. The firm's latest project, a children's medical research center, stood as a crown jewel among Victor's achievements, though these days, Rachel's innovative designs were earning just as much acclaim. Victor stood at his office window, watching the sunset paint the glass and steel landscape he'd helped create. The view from the 40th floor of their new headquarters offered a perfect perspective of how far they'd come since the scandal that had nearly destroyed everything. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Callahan? Your daughter's here, with the Thompson Project revisions." Rachel entered, every inch the accomplished architect she'd become. At 23, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd faced their worst nightmare and emerged stronger. Her final year thesis project had won national recognition, leading to a seamless transition into the family firm, this time built on truth rather than lies. "The sustainability features you suggested really pulled it together," she said, spreading blueprints across his desk. "Though I still think we should add a rooftop garden." Victor smiled, remembering similar arguments with her during her apprenticeship. "Show me your proposal." As they discussed design elements, his phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made them both pause. "Morrison Investment Group Scandal. Final restitution payments approved." Rachel picked up the phone, reading aloud. "Former investment banker James Morrison, serving his 8th year of a 15-year sentence for fraud and money laundering, has been ordered to forfeit his remaining assets. The funds will be distributed among victims of his extensive Ponzi scheme." "Skip to the good part," Victor suggested. Rachel scrolled down. Morrison's appeal for early release was denied last month. His former partner and co-conspirator, Charlotte Callahan, completed her 5-year sentence but remains under financial supervision. Sources say she works as a clerk at a small accounting firm, the only position available to a convicted felon with a record. "Quite a step down from her society lady aspirations," Victor observed. Rachel set down the phone. "Sarah Matthews sent me a video from her medical school graduation last week. The scholarship fund changed her whole family's future." The Matthews weren't alone. The Callahan Foundation, established from the ruins of Charlotte and Jim's schemes, had helped dozens of families rebuild. Victor had insisted on personally overseeing the restoration of every dollar stolen under his firm's name. Catherine entered without knocking, another habit unchanged by time. As the foundation's director, she'd transformed their family's darkest chapter into a force for good. "Guess who I saw at the grocery store?" she asked, settling into her usual chair. "Charlotte." She was pricing generic brands and using coupons. "That designer wardrobe's long gone. How the mighty have fallen." Rachel mused, no sympathy in her voice. "Did she see you?" "Oh, yes." Tried to pretend she was in a hurry, but I heard from Linda at the halfway house Charlotte's been trying to rebuild her social connections. No one will touch her with a 10-foot pole. Turns out stealing from children's medical funds makes you persona non grata in polite society. Victor remembered Charlotte's last court appearance, 2 years after her initial sentencing. She tried to appeal the financial restrictions, claiming she'd learned her lesson. The judge had been unimpressed, especially after evidence emerged that she'd attempted to contact some of Jim's old associates. "Speaking of social outcasts," Catherine continued, "heard anything about Jim lately?" "The prison chaplain's monthly report came yesterday," Victor replied. "Apparently, our friend Mr. Morrison has found religion. Again." It was his 3rd spiritual awakening since incarceration. The first 2 had coincided with parole hearings, both denied. His fellow inmates, many of them victims of similar investment schemes, ensured his time behind bars remained appropriately uncomfortable. "He tried writing to me again," Rachel mentioned casually. Same sob story about being misled by love and wanting to make amends with his only daughter. "And?" Catherine prompted. "I donated his letter to the Foundation's fraud awareness program. It's a perfect example of manipulation techniques." Victor felt a surge of pride. His daughter had transformed her pain into purpose, using her experience to help others spot the signs of financial predators. She guest lectured at universities, sharing her story to protect other families from similar schemes. The intercom buzzed again. "Mr. Callahan? The mayor's office is confirming your keynote speech for the Business Ethics Summit." Life had come full circle. The scandal that threatened to destroy them had instead become a platform for positive change. Victor's frank handling of the crisis, his commitment to making victims whole, and his push for industry reforms had earned him a new reputation. Champion of corporate integrity. "Did you see the latest deposit reports?" Catherine asked, pulling up documents on her tablet. The Foundation's Scholarship Fund is supporting 38 students this semester. Sarah Matthews started a support group for children of fraud victims at her medical school. Rachel moved to the window, watching the city lights flicker to life. Mom tried to friend me on social media last week. Used her sister's account since she's still banned from direct contact. What did you do? Catherine asked. Reported the account. Aunt Beatrice should know better than to help her circumvent court orders. Rachel's tone held no regret. Besides, I have all the family I need right here. Victor joined her at the window. In the distance, they could see the children's hospital they designed together, its windows glowing with hope rather than greed. The Callahan name meant something different now, not just beautiful buildings, but rock-solid integrity. His phone buzzed with another news alert. Former society fraudster spotted. Charlotte Callahan's new life. The article detailed her fall from grace. The tiny apartment, the entry-level job, the court-mandated financial monitoring that would follow her for another decade. Her attempts to write a tell-all book had been blocked by victim advocacy groups. Hard to believe it's been 5 years, Rachel mused. Sometimes I still wake up thinking it was all a bad dream. Then you remember we built something better from the ashes, Catherine added. Victor thought of the changes time had brought. Charlotte's carefully curated social circle had crumbled. Her former friends, now proud donors to the Callahan Foundation. Jim's investment empire had been dismantled, its legitimate assets used to reimburse victims. Their schemes had fallen apart, but Victor's firm had risen higher than ever, built on a foundation of trust they'd earned the hard way. The door opened again, admitting Victor's assistant. Final numbers from the Victim Restitution Program, Mr. Callahan. Every family has been made whole. With interest, Rachel took the report, smiling at the names. Former victims had become some of their strongest allies. The Matthews family had started a support network for others affected by investment fraud. Sarah's mother served on the foundation's board, turning her experience into advocacy for stronger financial protections. Remember what you told me that day in court? Rachel asked, turning to her father. About blood not making a family? The choices we make do, Victor finished. He looked at his daughter, his sister, his transformed firm, the family they'd rebuilt from truth rather than lies. Catherine raised her coffee cup in a mock toast. To choices and consequences. Speaking of consequences, Rachel added, checking her phone, Jim's latest parole hearing is next month. The victim impact statements are already flooding in. Victor nodded, remembering Jim's last appearance before the parole board. His attempts to play the reform sinner had collapsed when confronted with evidence that he'd tried to establish new investment schemes from behind bars. The board had been particularly interested in his correspondence with Charlotte, proving neither of them had truly changed. I saw Charlotte's sister at the grocery store, Catherine mentioned. Apparently, Charlotte tried to pitch a reality show about redemption and recovery. Every network turned her down. Something about not wanting to profit from stealing from sick children. Some reputations you can't rebuild, Rachel observed. Not that she's really trying. Did you see her LinkedIn profile? Still lists herself as a financial advisor, despite being legally barred from handling money. Victor turned back to the blueprints on his desk. Honest work, real achievement, true legacy. Some people never learn, but their choices made us stronger. Rachel nodded, adding notes to their project design. The Thompson development would include affordable housing for families facing medical challenges, another way to right old wrongs through new creation. Outside, the city hummed with life and possibility. Somewhere out there, Charlotte was returning to her small apartment, counting pennies and remembering her glory days. Jim Morrison was facing another night in his cell, his dreams of empire reduced to prison yard boasts no one believed. But in this office, surrounded by family forged in fire and bound by choice rather than blood, Victor Callahan knew they'd built something stronger than any lie could break. The price of truth had been high, but the rewards were beyond measure. Catherine gathered her things, heading out to another foundation meeting. Rachel turned back to their project, adding final touches to a design that would help rather than harm. And Victor watched the city lights shimmer, knowing they'd transformed betrayal's ashes into something beautiful. The truth had cost them their illusions, but had given them something better. Authenticity, healing, and a legacy built on the strongest foundation of all honesty, freely chosen, even when the price was high. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.